all the trials and troubles.
She sings a deep and soulful country gospel. I think you can hear the truth of what she sings.
Teresa Lewis is singing for strength and comfort with her execution set 2 days away. She sang in church through her childhood in Danville. Both parents worked in a textile mill. Back then, Lewis shared a room with her 3 siblings. Now in solitary confinement for the past 7 years, her former chaplain says her singing voice was used to carry hope to other inmates nearby.
She will start to sing a song of faith, and it quiets. And I've seen it happen.
On a phone call from Jared, Teresa Lewis sang and spoke to us. Her spirits from beginning to end were surprisingly high.
Hello, Miss Beck, how are you?
But quickly, the conversation turned to how she was in what could be her final hours, her answer still hopeful.
Hoping that something's going to turn around. And like I said, you know, if I have to go home and be with Jesus, I know that's going to be the best thing.
And she asked to be forgiven for the worst things she's ever done by the people who now suffer because of her, the daughter and sister of the men she once loved and planned to murder.
Knowing that I was part of it, of taking her family away and my participation in it, I don't think it's enough words to even begin to tell her how sorry I am.
Many courts see her story differently and think it should come to an end on Thursday.
I just want people to know that you can be a good person and make the wrong choice. I do want them to know that.
With virtually every appeal exhausted and a clemency request denied, without intervention, Lewis will find peace in her advocates as her voice is silenced.
Teresa is someone who looked at the worst of herself and decided to become something better.
In heaven someday.
When Teresa Lewis entered the execution chamber tonight, she looked visibly scared. Her eyes were wide and sort of nervously darting around the room to take in her surroundings. After she was strapped to the gurney, Lewis was asked if she had any final words, and she asked, "Is Catie here?" We later confirmed that would be Catie Clifton, the sister and daughter of the murder victims in this case. Last year in Virginia, over 300 people were killed in alcohol-related crashes.
If it's going to save some lives, then I'm all for it.
Images of totaled vehicles and shattered families are left behind. A steep price to pay for a victim. But now in Chesterfield County, the driver's price may be going up. The average drunk driver can spend up to $10,000 in their defense. But county leaders say that amount doesn't always include the time and resources they spend to respond to the incident.
This is just a little piece of the way to hold those people responsible, and I think it's very fair.
When we arrived at the home of retired Staff Sergeant Brian Pierce, the remains of Thanksgiving dinner were being put away and an apple pie put in the oven.
Because it said about 30 minutes.
When dishes were stored, he showed us to his living room where he stores some of his most valuable memories.
Each one of these has a story.
16 years in the Army has collected quite a few, and his memory is sharp to recall each of them.
They're from the 177 Brigade Support Command from Alaska, gave me that one in Iraq.
But one of these awards gets its own box, and the story behind it is perhaps the hardest for Pierce to bring to mind.
And nobody really wants a Purple Heart.
He earned it while serving his second tour in Iraq. In October of 2006, while acting as the gunner in this Humvee, a roadside IED exploded, putting 37 holes in the vehicle and one in the back of Pierce's skull.
I remember the explosion. I remember what it did to the truck. And I remember how violent the explosion was.
That Thanksgiving, Pierce spent at Walter Reed Hospital, nearly in a coma, not knowing if his traumatic brain injury would ever let him walk again. The accident left Pierce legally blind, but he's still able to see things up close and in front of him. He says his injury can make his cognitive abilities come and go from day to day, but physically he does fine. Now he's helping to raise his 2 children. Going weekly to therapy for post-traumatic stress, and says every day gets a little better.
I give thanks on Thanksgiving for these 3 people. The depth of me is sitting right here.
But he's also mindful of his other family, every soldier who is serving abroad.
I'm really thankful for those guys. And there isn't a minute goes by that that I don't wish that I was in their place.
For the moment, he's loving right where he is, doing something almost as American, eating apple pie with his family on Thanksgiving. Well, Congressman Eric Cantor had said he was cautiously optimistic about winning his re-election, but after the results came in, many of his supporters were saying the cautious part wasn't really necessary. A very decisive victory for Cantor as he enters his 6th term in office. Many Virginians celebrating the local races for Republicans, but also national races across the country.
I'm happy, real happy.
For Richmond Republicans, the election night sentiments were all the same.
What a great night tonight.
A great night and a fast night. Congressman Eric Cantor's victory was decided early. Cuccinelli's lawsuit attacks just one part of the health care reform package, the part that says you and all other Americans must purchase health insurance. And though he attacks just one portion, if he succeeds, he could take down the whole health care reform bill because of the way it was written. A judge in federal court today said his courtroom was just a step along the process. He says in this legal battle, it will end in the hands of the U.S. Supreme Court.
This case is about protecting liberty. It is about the outer reach of federal power.
In federal court Monday, it was one government taking on another. The Commonwealth of Virginia challenging the federal government over the new Federal Health Care Act. The sound of passing cars was perhaps the last 17-year-old Kevin Sullivan heard before being taken to the hospital. Now in a coma since Friday, his parents hope he can hear their voices.
I talk to him every time I go in there. I tell him I'm sitting in the waiting room and I'm not leaving until he goes with me.
He's a fighter.
His mother says a wiggled finger has been the only response her voice has gotten.
So that's just the hardest part, is hoping he can hear me. I want him to open his eyes.
An Amtrak train heading north, traveling close to 80 miles an hour and blaring its horn, collides with a man walking along the tracks.
They estimated it took them about a mile and a half to stop the train at the speed they were going.
Then a search for the victim. The train's engineer telling police she's certain she hit a man. Aboard the stopped train, 260 passengers wait while investigators carefully scan the brush embankments of the tracks and eventually find a male victim who's pronounced dead on the scene.
It was totally shocking to me that any business would not want to include as many patrons as possible.
Jeff Wells and Mac Pence were married in Massachusetts. The couple says they haven't run into any problems with family memberships. In fact, they have one at another gym in town.
It's a message that they're not a family and they're not included.
American Family Fitness clarified their policy by saying that under their rules, for a family membership to apply to a couple, they must be legally married as defined by Virginia law, or it can be one parent and one dependent. Local delegate John O'Bannon says Virginians spoke very clearly about this issue by way of referendum a few years ago.
That issue was supported by the public with a strong positive vote, and marriage is between a man and a woman.
O'Bannon also says AmFam has rights as a private business. Several businesses like Gold's Gym and the Lewis Ginter Botanical Gardens extend family memberships to any 2 adults with 1 residence. The Children's Museum also extends 1 to 2 legal guardians of a child, marriage not required.